Those three rights groups have released findings of a probe into the Israeli attack which killed Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil in April. The investigation by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and Legal Agenda shows Israel deliberately targeted the 42-year-old and her camerawoman who was wounded in the attack. According to the UN Human Rights Office, deliberate attacks on civilians is considered a war crime. For more on this story, we can go across to our correspondent Noga Tarnopolsky standing by in Jerusalem. Noga, good afternoon to you. How is Israel likely to respond to these findings?
Well, Delano, I'm afraid that Israel is very likely to simply ignore these findings. For one, there isn't really anything new in this report. We were hearing back in April from the one surviving eyewitness and from people who had been nearby in the zone that it appeared to be a direct, intentional Israeli strike against these two women. Now, Amal Khalil was known for working with a Hezbollah-linked news agency. It's unclear if, in fact, Israel did target her, if that was the reason. What the Israeli army said at the time, and hasn't changed since then, is that the two women, her producer and the correspondent, were in what's called a no-return zone. In other words, a zone that had been evacuated ahead of major Israeli army operations and that no one was allowed to return to. Part of the debate is whether journalists should be exempt from those kind of orders during wartime. But I think, given that there isn't, that no new facts were presented in this report, and the accusation has remained the same since April, I don't expect we're going to hear any major reaction either from the Israeli government or from the Israeli army, who claims still to be investigating the matter.
Noga, earlier today we had Israel, which announced that 2 Israeli soldiers had been killed in Lebanon. Plus, we also got reports that of Israeli strikes in Lebanon yesterday and earlier today. But we right now have those U.S. broker talks which are taking place in Rome between Israel and Lebanon. So, do those talks serve any purpose at all?
You know, it's a real muddle what's going on here. The talks serve the purpose of trying to create a pathway towards a better future and towards one in which the Israeli-Lebanese border can return to being a normal international border between two countries. The IED that killed these two Israeli soldiers yesterday, in fact, ahead of the Israeli strikes, obviously breaks any kind of a ceasefire, but also it's not Lebanon's doing. And Israel is negotiating for this possible better future with Lebanon, with the Republic of Lebanon under U.S. auspices. Hezbollah is acting as you could call it as a rogue terror group, or you could call it as an arm of Iran in Lebanon. So this act by Hezbollah killed 2 Israeli soldiers, wounded 4 more. Israel responded pretty harshly immediately. And I think that separately from that clash, the talks are moving forward in the hope that both sides have, in this case, Lebanon and Israel, of being somehow able to neutralize Hezbollah. Of course, that's a very difficult task, and that will depend to a certain extent on the success or not of the U.S. talks with Iran, because Hezbollah really is an Iranian outpost in Lebanon.
And finally, Noga, today we've had prosecutors in Israel who charged an Israeli settler for killing a Palestinian activist in the West Bank. What more do we know about this story, and how big is this?
This is big, Delano, because it's the first time since October 7th, and following a real surge of settler violence, that any Israeli settler in the West Bank has been charged, in this case, with homicide. So it is serious, and it may be opening a pathway for further Israeli charges. In this case, Aude Haltalin, who was killed, it was a videotaped assault by Inon Levy, the settler. It was very well documented, and moreover, the man who was killed was a very well-known pacifist Palestinian activist. So this received an enormous amount of publicity. Doesn't surprise me that this is the first case that Israeli charges, that the Israeli prosecutors are going to bring against a settler. Obviously, we have to add this comes at an extremely delicate political moment because the Israeli defense minister and the Israeli government, in fact, are trying to make settlers immune, legally immune from charges for this sort of terror attacks. And it's a fight now, not only, among Israelis and Palestinians or settlers and everyone else. This is also a fight between the Israeli judiciary and the Israeli political echelon. So I do actually expect that there will be significant political repercussions. There will be an effort probably by the Israeli government to try and quash this or at least delay it until after the October elections.
Wow. Noga, thank you very much for that. Noga Tarnopolsky reporting that for us.